Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Album Fight Club. It has been a month since Cody and I have gotten together for this, but we are back and ready to rumble. Cody, I'm here with you, my co host, my one and only. How are you?
Mike, I'm fantastic. Do you think this is safe to say that we should call this Album Fight Club Season 2 since we did take an elongated break away from creating content?
I don't know if you listened to the sidebar I did in between our last episode and this episode, but I sort of called it Season 2, even though we're not really into like seasons or anything. Um, it's not like Long Monday was. But I mean, we both took a break because, I mean, you were busy. I was busy with the show I was doing. That's done. I think your schedule is becoming more applicable now. So I think we're back in the swing of things, perhaps. And we're
It is.
starting off this new, whatever you want to call it, with a rather big one. It would have happened at some point. I mean, we could do this for another 5 episodes, and then Cody and I could just be like, you know what? I don't think we have the juice for it anymore. We could do it for another 1,000 episodes. I mean, I doubt that, but we'll see. But at some point, we would have to eventually talk about the Beatles. I don't think we could do a show about music and not eventually hit this band. And so here's the moment. We're going to talk about them. In particular, two albums of theirs, as we usually do. We look at two albums, and the ones we have chosen, because when you look at the Beatles catalog, you can go with a lot of options. But the two we landed on were Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Abbey Road. Now, Cody, you were actually mainly the impetus of doing this episode and these two records, so I'll let you take the floor for a second to speak about it.
So, here's my opinion as a fan of music. The Beatles, sometimes I feel like they go through this process where they get way too much credit, but then you take an opportunity to listen to their recorded catalog, and then the catalog of live material, and then the catalog of unreleased material, and then their post Beatles material. And I think doing a deep dive into listening to the Beatles as a fan of music and not a fan of the band itself or that collective of musicians will immediately make you reconsider the whole Beatles are overrated. Both of these records, Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road, uh, sit atop of hundreds of thousands of greatest records of all time list, and it is absolutely immeasurable the impact that the Beatles had on modern recorded music in ways that are still felt today. That really, I think, these two records showcase the best. So, Mike, I don't know if you know this. At the time of Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles had decided to almost entirely become a studio only act. So they go, hey guys, we're kind of sick of like touring and having all these headaches and going and playing these shows. What if we take the opportunity to really just deep dive into the recording process and instead make these really big landscape records? These records that, alongside of the technology of stereo recording and stereo output, really paved the way for every single piece of music that has come since. That being said, even if you listen to these on a mono mix, on a headphones only, where, you know, everything is all together at once, the talent, preparation, and skill and enthusiasm that it took to create these two records is nothing short of amazing. There are moments on both of these records that I think some bands have chased that specific feeling and have never hit. There are guitar solos that appear on Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper's where I feel like bands like the Eagles heard it and then said, we need to do better than that, and then spent 20 years failing to do better than a single moment that George Harrison or John Lennon would have come up with. And so I think doing this, because really you could do any two Beatles record together. Once you get past Meet the Beatles and like whatever the second Beatles record is, what is Night Out with the Beatles or whatever?
Well, first is Please Please Me, and then I think it's Meet the Beatles, and then later
Yeah.
comes With the Beatles, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, so once you get past those three, of them being like, we're a little pop act, and then they go, hold on, I think we kind of have something here. Let's ride this momentum, but instead of riding it to mediocrity, let's take all of the success that we're witnessing and then start to create experiences, or what we now know as eras, is what it would be called in today's scene.
Well, you have to keep in mind that, I mean, the first half of the Beatles' career was they were a boy band. They were a legitimized, very popular, very influential boy band, basically. They were doing love songs. And, I mean, their first 5 records, every single one has at least one cover on it. And I'm pretty sure Please Please Me, their first one, has like half the songs are covers. And you know how I feel about covers on studio albums. I let it slide a little bit because it was the early 60s. And honestly, I don't think music was quite where it would eventually become. But then you get to something like Rubber Soul, where Rubber Soul is the moment in which they do Nowhere Man. And it's like, what the hell is this? It has nothing to do with a woman. It's not about love. It's not about affection. It's about just this dude, right? And then Revolver, and then so on and so forth. And in spite of the fact that the first half of their career was just glorified, boy band tracks, they're like the Shakespeare of music. I mean, literally everything after them was influenced by them. And I have a real hard time with people who are like into music. They either play music or they're well versed in music, and they go, "Yeah, the Beatles suck. Like the Beatles are just like boring and it's like, how can you like, you don't have to love them. Like, they don't have to be your favorite band ever, but like, come on, how can you say the Beatles are not like influential, massive, amazing at what they did? It's like, I just don't quite get it. But I've run into that conversation more than once, unfortunately. And you're right in that we could have chose any 2 records. But I think these 2 in particular are pretty interesting landmark moments in their career. You already mentioned the fact that by Sgt. Pepper, they were really off the idea of touring. They're just like, let's just do studio work, which for a band as big as the Beatles, that's a fucking ballsy move to just be like, you know what, touring? Nah, no, never again. Not happening. And then you have Abbey Road, which is their last album they ever recorded together. And like, it's the Beatles, right? What are you going to do on your last record? Because you think of other big bands' last records like Led Zeppelin, In Through the Outdoor. And it's just like, yeah, it's not very good. Like, In Through the Outdoor is my least favorite Zeppelin record. And it's unfortunate that it's their last one they ended on. Whereas Abbey Road, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but like, quite possibly the greatest classic rock record ever made, in my opinion. So they went out with a total bang. So I like that we're talking about these 2 records.
Yeah, and to end this and get into the actual conversation, or I suppose the fight between these 2 records, there is something amazing about pre-computer music. Listen, I will mention this in the upcoming discussion. Listen to Ringo Starr play the drums. And then listen to Ringo Starr play the drums with a metronome. Like, separate from the music. Just pull one up on your phone or find one on the internet. Ringo Starr has perfect feel. He is playing to probably within a millisecond of perfect time. Listen to George Harrison. Listen, there's only so much you can do with like a Neve console. There's only so much you can adjust. Eventually, it comes down to, can you play these songs? Can you play with intention and emotion? Listen to Paul McCartney's bass parts. Sure, he's Paul McCartney. Yeah, dude was in Wings, but also a fantastic musician. And then obviously, John Lennon's my least favorite of the Beatles. But his contributions, his contributions to both of these records is nothing short of amazing. Every single person in that band carried their weight, which is a hard thing to say. Real hard when you listen to some other groups and you go, oh, I can just tell someone's kind of like selling it here, you know? So, that being said, Mike, I say we get into the pit, we get into the ring, and we fight about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and in my opinion, the second best record to come from Abbey Road.
Well, are you going to talk about what's the first? You can't have a little dangle like that and not bring it up.
It's Dark Side of the Moon.
Ah, yes, of course. How could I forget? How could I forget Cody's favorite thing in life, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd? Speaking of, though, as far as discussing these two records, I think what the best approach is for us is what we did for Dark Side and Wish You Were Here, which was it was not a track by track fight. If you include the Abbey Road medley, which I think you should, in each individual track, you're suddenly have a fight of like 12 versus 18 songs. And it's just at that point, it's like it's way too complicated to try and match these things up. So I think what we should do is just talk about Sgt. Pepper for a while. We can go track by track. Then once we're done, talk about Abbey Road for a while, track by track, and then in the end, collectively, how do we feel about these two? So I think we should just start with Sgt. Pepper.
Would you like to go first?
Sure. The thing I want to point out before I start talking about the individual songs is that I think it's an interesting move for the Beatles as well in this time period to like take on a personified different group. Like, if you look at the record, Sgt. Pepper, I'm pretty sure nowhere on it does it say the Beatles. It's like this group called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band made a record under the guise of like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, even though it's obviously the Beatles, right? But you look all over it and they're just like playing this other act, which I think is kind of interesting, especially for the concept of this album, which from my perspective is just like a variety show, basically. It's different. I can see the different characters in this thing, and Paul's playing this guy while Ringo's playing this guy, and once Paul's song ends, Ringo comes up in the spotlight and leads his song, and then he walks off stage and the next person comes up. It's a really cool journey of an album because everything on it is so vastly different. Like, nothing really feels the same on it, even though the Beatles collectively have such like a unified cohesion and sound. I think the White Album is where they really just go too far with it, and it's just like it literally is not a band anymore. It's just four guys collectively adding tracks together. Whereas with Sgt. Pepper, the thing I love about Sgt. Pepper is that, yeah, it's four guys in a band doing their several different things, but collectively it still feels like a band. And it's cool with Sgt. Pepper. The opening track is also the title track. Sets the scene. You can hear like audience in the background. You can hear the orchestra starting up, and then comes in with the drums and the sort of like electric guitar, really fuzzy electric guitar. I love that part towards the chorus of the song where George Harrison comes in with that. I think it's George, it might be John, where he's like bing, 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 bing. And it's just like that fuzz. You can feel the fur on it, like it's so fuzzy. Love that. It's a cool opener. Just to point out, Paul is my favorite Beatle. And so whenever Paul's on something, I'm usually more invested in it. Paul leads the vocals here, but it is collectively a group effort. It's very much, even if we want to quantify it as, it's not the Beatles. Okay, sure, Beatles, gotcha. It was probably John's idea, honestly. But it is the Beatles, right? And it feels like a cohesive band through and through. And I think starting with such a band-centered song, like you hear the guitar, you hear the bass, you hear the drums, you hear the vocals, all of it's present. It's a great establishment of saying, hey, this is a band record, even though a few tracks later, there's like no drums or no guitar or no bass. But I think as a starting point, it's a great opening track.
I agree with that. And I think what is really, really cool is, like I mentioned before, they started really recording music in stereo. If you've never listened to this record with headphones, this is a wild experience because you get this really, really beautiful trick where the audience is panned the full spectrum of the listening spectrum, the full weight of it. So you get them in the left and the right. And then you start to get like crew noises, like rolling cases, things getting plugged in on the left-hand side. And then when the instrument guitar comes in, it's the right-hand side. Paul starts singing, right-hand side. The rest of the band comes in on the left-hand side, and then one of the greatest tricks, Disney's greatest trick. Slowly, all of the backing vocals start to pan in the middle. So you're going left to middle, but it happens in real time, as if someone is turning a knob. And then Paul comes in, right to middle, and by the end of the song, it's the unified front of the Beatles, which is so brilliant. Because like Mike said, if you view it as like a variety show, you get almost this, you almost get this image of, okay, there's a spotlight on Paul, boom, rest of the band, now we're on the stage. And there is something so purely energetic, so like uprising about just the fun that it sounds like they had coming up with this idea. Almost like the first inside joke in a way, where it's like, hold on, guys, we're the Beatles, but we're not the Beatles. And we're all going to wear these really silly outfits, and we're not going to be the Beatles, but we're the Beatles. And they write some of their best material on this record, which is crazy. So, you get through the first song of Sgt. Pepper's, right? And you go, oh man, this is awesome. I wonder how they're going to keep up this energy. I bet it's going to be an absolute classic. John or Paul is going to come on to this song. And Mike, what happens next?
My boy Ringo comes in with what I think, maybe this is a hot take, I think this is Ringo's best song in the Beatles catalog. Not, a lot of people say Ringo's the worst Beatle, and I don't know.
They are fucking lunatics.
Yeah, I don't know about worst Beatle. Now, admittedly though, if I had to throw somebody down at fourth spot, I do go with Ringo. I'm not a huge fan of John either, but I think John collectively brought more but that's nothing against Ringo. Ringo's still amazing. And you get a song like this, which is such a Ringo Starr song. It's so Ringo to do with a little help from my friends. It's so him. The vibe is so him. The jolly good feeling of it is so him. I don't think he ever wrote a dark, sad song in his life. But then you get songs like this, and it's like, man, it's so feel good. It's so just catchy. It's so sing-alongy, which you pointed out, to go from the heavy band title track to very quarter note pluck with a little help from my friends with Ringo leading it. I think it's a great turn of events. I think it's a great follow-up. And like I said, it's probably my favorite Ringo track in his entire contribution to the Beatles.
Mike, I almost have to agree, except this is not my favorite Ringo track.
Okay.
First off, people who shit on Ringo, granted, the Beatles have been broken up for almost, 50 years now. This is a dead conversation. We've ran this horse into the ground and built houses on top of it. All Ringo does is bring a good vibe, and it kills me that people were like, screw you, Ringo. He's a good drummer. The songs he wrote were fun. Not everything has to be dark and serious or these anthems. But Ringo, on this one, he said, hey, sometimes I just need a little help from my friends. That's so beautiful. And my favorite thing about all of the Ringo songs is it's been kind of a joke for decades that, George, John, and Paul, they just kind of placated Ringo, right? They said, okay, Ringo, we'll write your songs, we'll play your songs, whatever. Like there's that whole Family Guy joke about, we're going to put this right on the fridge so everyone can see it.
Yeah.
That is such a shithead take because...
But man, that's funny though. That is a funny joke.
It's so funny, but they're putting in the work on this song.
Yeah, they are.
You have Paul playing a legitimately good bass line. You've got that little piano in the background. You've got everybody singing. Do you need somebody? I just want someone to love. Do you need anybody? I just need somebody to love. In my opinion, now, Mike, this might be a little personal for the podcast. As you know, Mike, but people listening at home, I'm sober, and I wasn't sober before, and now I am sober. And when it came to the year anniversary of me hitting sobriety, all I could think about, the only thought in my head was, I get by with a little help from my friends. You rely on people. And this song means so much to me because instead of it being some, like we'll experience later on this record, and especially in Abbey Road, these beautiful, long, winding stories, it's a dude who plays the drums going, I just need a little help from my friends. What if I sing out of key? What if I go to Murphy's tonight and I sing out of key? You stand up and walk out on me? No. And it's so absolutely pure. That's the thing about Ringo songs. He had an idea and he said, okay, well, I'm 25% of the Beatles, dude.
Yep.
We'll play my songs. I don't care.
Can't take that away from him.
You cannot take that away from Ringo. And he post Beatles has had the most fun, does no work. He just does like variety shows, goes on tour, sells out Madison Square Garden, and is like, oh, I'm just Ringo Starr. And it's like, yo, you played on Norwegian Wood. What are you doing? Like, this is crazy. What a perfect life for Ringo Starr.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
that's my.
we go from Ringo Starr's. Now, is your favorite Ringo track one of the other tracks we're going to discuss today?
Oh yeah.
Okay, then I'll save that conversation. We go from Ringo's "With a Little Help from My Friends" to John's "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." And here's my thing. How do I phrase this without coming across as like contrarian? My thing is, I don't hate "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," but for me, it's always been a song that just doesn't quite mesh with me. It's a little too White Album, but like the parts of White Album I don't like, where it's like they're just experimenting and really not making anything out of it, for me at least. Obviously, it's LSD. Obviously, it's probably referring to drugs. Yes, whatever, right? But for me, it's just kind of a bland track, especially on an album with so many great tracks. It's not one that I skip per se, but it is one that's lower tier for me and is a mark, not against the album, but one that I do take in consideration. Like, oh yeah, Lucy's on that album. I usually forget about that track because I'm not a huge fan of it.
I don't know. I really love Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Okay.
But I think it is because it's almost hard to view these songs to view this record from just a simple song writing standpoint. Because if you listen to the previous Beatles material, they do this really beautiful thing where every record gets a little more dense. And then you get to Sgt. Pepper's, and it's like, oh, we can just do whatever we want to. It's almost like, in a way, this is the first time that the Beatles felt comfortable using the status of being objectively the biggest band in the world and saying, you would just give us whatever money, so we're just going to do whatever we want. And I think there's something really, really cool about the way this song comes in. There's something cool about John's voice. There's something very interesting about everybody coming in. My one issue with a lot of these Beatles songs is whenever you start to realize the pattern, it becomes really obvious. Where it's like everybody's going to sing on the real big parts. It's almost every one of these, in a good way and a bad way, is anthemic. But I think that Lucy does this really beautiful thing where it almost gives you a soundscape vibe. It's like you could sit outside on a starry night and listen to this song. Or when you're really tired and driving home from work, you listen to the song and you go, this is putting me in a headspace. And I think that's a really big benefit of this song. But also, John Lennon is my least favorite Beatle. And so, it's just one of those things where I think that it's a great song, but I can see where you're coming from, Mike.
Yeah, and it's not the kind of thing where I skip it per se, but when I take the journey of Sgt. Pepper, I'm usually not looking forward to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's usually one that I just kind of get to and I'm like, okay, well, at least it's not super long. And the thing too about Sgt. Pepper for me is that I usually forget how many songs are on this record. Usually it feels like a record that just flies by, which is a good thing. But then you get to a song like Getting Better, and I'm just like, man, I forget all the time this song's even on this record. I think it's on like Magical Mystery Tour or something. But Getting Better is a pretty great deep cut Paul song. Happens to be on Sgt. Pepper, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But also it's one of those like simplistic Beatles tracks where it's really not doing anything groundbreaking. It's very simple, very easy to follow, very like, I feel like most beginner students in drumming or guitar could probably play this song pretty well. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it just kind of works and it's just a good little song. And I think the Beatles were champions of sometimes less is more. Like this song doesn't need all this complexity. It doesn't need crazy guitar solos and double bass kick pedals. Like we can just make a simple quarter note 4/4 beat, have a good little sound around it. Paul can sing his heart out on it and it just kind of works. So despite the fact that Getting Better is a pretty deep Beatles cut. I mean, like deep Beatles cut. I still enjoy it.
I see. This song threw me through a loop. It got to it, and I was really stoked. And then I said, "Man, the simplicity of it almost hurts it for me." Because once you get to this era of the Beatles, there's so much structure where they're doing one thing and then another, and they're looping back to one thing. And sometimes on certain records, they'll reference a song or they'll do a reprise like they do on Sgt. Pepper's. And this song, I don't know, it just really kind of feels like it holds it back. I understand why it's here. And I think musically it's a very, very good song. But it's just, in my opinion, one of the least interesting songs on Sgt. Pepper's. And also, I will admit, it's very weird to hear John Lennon talking about beating his wife on this song. Because the first thing he says in his verse is, "I used to beat my woman." And it's like, Jesus Christ. I would not say that on a record. That is not something that I would write.
Well, it was a different time.
It was. But man, just coming out and saying, "I used to beat my wife." It's like, whoa, good God. Were you also the Nuremberg trials? What the fuck is this?
Well then, Cody, how do you feel about Fixing a Hole?
Good Beatles song. It feels like a prototype Wings song.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
It just feels like one of those things where you start to notice, almost as if the tension that's arising in the Beatles, you can feel everybody dropping these little hints of what they're going to attempt in the future. And I think that's a really, really cool thing. So, obviously you need hindsight to look at that. You need Wings Across America or Band on the Run to be able to look at Fixing a Hole and go, "Oh, hey, what are you doing there, Paul? What's going on here?" But there are some very cool moments on this song. I mean, Paul's obviously going for it. God bless Paul McCartney. He's really going for it, vocally. But also, there's that cool moment during, it's like we're at the end of every verse where George Harrison's guitar comes out of the right-hand speaker or the right-hand headphone, and it's this super trebly, like old school, gainy, just noise. And every time it would come out, I'd be like, whoa, that's so cool. Because whether you like it or I like it or not, the Beatles have been deified, essentially. I mean, say John Lennon's name in New York City, and 10,000 people will come crying. They'll go to Strawberry Fields and weep, or whatever. Mention George Harrison's name in a Guitar Center, and at least 6 old men are going to go, "Hey, he was friends with Eric Clapton, right?" And Ringo, obviously, and Paul McCartney's Paul McCartney. But to hear them actually just doing the thing that they're recognized for is so wonderful, because the problem about idolizing somebody so much that they become rarefied air is that occasionally their successes don't seem so successful. Their accomplishments don't seem so great. But then it's like, okay, Neil Armstrong was on the moon. That's cool regardless of whatever we can do now with people in the ISS. We put a man on the moon, and he did it. So I think, going back to Fixing a Hole, I think that's really, really something important, because you hear George Harrison's name and you go, "Oh, he's this killer guitar player," and you hear him play, and it's like, "Oh no, he actually really was a fantastic guitar player. We didn't trick ourselves."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's weird because this album takes a lot of twists and turns, and once again, the thing I love about this album is just conceptually I see all of it, right? The whole variety show thing, every song, the backdrop changes and the character comes out, and it's cool. It's real cool conceptually. But a song like Fixing a Hole, if I had to just make a playlist of the best 50 Beatles songs, you'd be amazed that a lot of songs on Sgt. Pepper are not on that list. Getting Better, not on the list. Lucy, not on the list. With a Little Help from My Friends, definitely on the list. Fixing a Hole, not on the list. And that's not because it's a bad song per se. It's just kind of like a song that in the journey of Sgt. Pepper itself, I'm cool with, but removed from Sgt. Pepper, I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's fine. You mentioned the whole Wings thing. I totally see it. But that doesn't mean it's like cracking the top 50 of Beatles tracks. You know, it's like, it's just a cool song. Yeah, and I value it for that it can just be a cool little song that exists in this spot on this album. And if I throw on Sgt. Pepper, eventually I'm going to get to Fixin' a Hole. But it's also one where I'm like, oh, I'm putting on Sgt. Pepper. I can't wait for, I'm not going to say Fixin' a Hole, right? So
Right.
it is what it is. But.
Thank you.
But, do you know where I'm going with this?
I think so.
She's Leaving Home comes next. And bro, I got to tell you, that's a top 50 Beatles song right there. That's a killer for me. Again, this whole conceptual progression thing that I'm talking about. So, you know, Paul's up there strumming his bass on Fixin' a Hole, and, you know, the lights darken and the audience claps, and it's a good job. And then the crew's rotating the set, or the drops are coming in. And the first thing you hear is that, I feel like it's a harp, right? It's like the plucking harp, whatever.
It's definitely a harp.
Yeah, it's so goddamn cinematic, this song. It's so, I see every second of it. It's so goddamn good. And I love that Paul and John play characters, right? I'm pretty sure Paul's playing the dad and John's probably playing the mother. You know, oh man, this song's so goddamn good. And I just love the ethereal vocal that John takes on, while Paul is more like grounded in reality, quote unquote. Man, talk about cinematic songs. This is so good.
I have to agree. This world is too awful for Paul McCartney, because you listen to a song like this and you can feel a certain level of compassion that I think some people would just swing into as a joke. But hearing this story about what I'm assuming is a woman running away either for romance or some kind of like abortion, that's what kind of the song feels like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Lyrically, so potent, because I love this ever-shifting story about the woman doing something and then her parents feeling as if they have been wronged because of somebody trying to better their life on their own accord, instead of doing it as like almost like a communal effort. But then you start to add all of these instruments that, like I mentioned earlier, with all of this layering that they're doing. There's a harp, which is beautiful. We've done this podcast now. This must be like, what, 15 episodes? Mm-hmm. 16 episodes, not counting sidebars. Very rarely do you hear a harp come in. And they're so unbelievably beautiful. And then you get the strings. You get a whole string section on this. You get a mandolin floating in the background. You get violins. You get a piano. And it's just so amazing, because you know that somebody suggested, let's bring all of this in instead of making it this weird, somber, melancholic story. It's almost like, I want to say it feels like a precursor to like Eleanor Rigby in a way, to where it's going, how big can we make this? How much emotion can we throw into this? And in a way, to me, this almost feels like a response to Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Because you listen to this song, and it almost feels like Paul McCartney going, okay, yeah, you guys can do it good, but don't you forget, we're the Beatles. Mm-hmm. And I'm Paul McCartney. But not out of like some kind of aggressive confrontational way. Almost like a game of really, really good pickup basketball. Like, okay, yeah, we're going to play now. Heck yeah. And I think that's so absolutely fantastic. In comparison to Mr. Kite, which possibly is my least favorite song on this whole record, and maybe in the original Beatles catalog, might be my least favorite original Beatles composition.
Huh. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I would probably agree with you that it's probably my least favorite song on the record. It's just a little too zany. It's a little too it's, the whole circus vibe is there, and I do like
Yeah.
that part where they do that boop 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 boop, like that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, but the whole song's just John being his like weird ass pretentious John Lennon self. It's like, what
Hmm.
in the world is this? It's like, this feels like the precursor to I Am the Walrus, which I'm not a really big fan of I Am the Walrus. I think it's just pretension to the nth degree. And
Yeah.
once again, though, in the conceptual idea of Sergeant Pepper's, I kind of do like it because it's so different than um, She's Leaving Home. It's like this total, the next scene in the play we're putting on, and it's like this crazy, zany carnival thing, which I do like it for that. But then again, once, like you said, if you remove this from Sergeant Pepper and it's just like in a Beatles playlist, I'm like, what the, Mr. Kite? Like, oh, Jesus, not this
Yeah.
song.
The only thing that I think kind of works with this song, it almost feels kind of like in addition to the story, almost like an addendum to the story that's being told on She's Leaving Home, but almost from someone who doesn't want to come out and say that they're telling a story that's connected. Like, you ever had a friend who did something awful and you didn't want to just come out and say that they did a really awful thing because you're trying to keep like an appearance? That's kind of
Mhm.
what Mr. Kite feels like. Like, hey, did you hear about this thing that happened? Which I, on one end works, but on the other end, the mounting tension that was like growing in the Beatles at this point, and especially this level, what I would assume was just pure exhaustion from being such a studio behemoth. It almost feels like John Lennon heard She's Leaving and said, I can do something similar. And it's just a really poor attempt at it. But, I mean, once again, for its merit, it ended up on Sergeant Pepper's. So, I mean, it's a decent song. It's just in the list of these songs, not very good for its attempt.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it's like I said, it's one of the things about Sergeant Pepper that I'm not a huge fan of, which is it's got big highs and big lows for me. But luckily, after Mr. Kite, we get a pretty big high, at least for me, which
Crazy.
is Within You Without You, which, oh my God, what, George Harrison coming in. And, if you know George Harrison, he was into like India and Indian culture and stuff. And he wanted to bring it over to America because he felt like America and a lot of the Western civilization wasn't getting enough of that. Oh man, what a cool, like to have a sitar on your album and just like prevalent. And that's the thing you're playing. And just like, the vibes and that section where like there's no vocals but the drums, like the boom 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 boom, and they get into like the sitar solos, bro, done, so good.
It's very much a highlight of this record,
Oh
in
yeah,
my opinion.
easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, please continue. I feel like I cut you off.
No, I mean, I love it. I think it's really cool. I don't know if you've heard the Las Vegas show Beatles Love, I think it's called. It's the Cirque du Soleil version. They have a
Hmm.
mashup between this and Tomorrow Never Knows. It's a pretty cool mashup. I think
That's crazy.
Within You Without You is just better on its own, but it is cool to hear it with like louder drums and everything that's going on. Really cool, and also really quiet, like a really just quiet moment for the record. But I think that's what makes it great, is that it is so subtle. It is so just like in a small little bubble, and yet it almost feels like George just sitting on a empty planet, just like staring into the universe, just like watching the stars around him as he's singing this and playing it. It's cool. Again, it's cinematic as hell.
It's very cool, and I have to admit, the sound of when I assume it's a hand drum. When the hand drum comes in, there's this sound that ends at every time someone touches the drum, where it's almost like a reverse,
Mhm.
and it's such a satisfying, like unreal, almost like undefinable noise. And then, like Mike said, they do this section where everything drops out and it's just the drum. But whoever's playing the drum is doing like they start doing like a polyrhythm, and it's crazy to think that someone heard this and that inspired them to learn how to do a polyrhythm. So my headcanon is that Bleed by Meshuggah doesn't happen without this song.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, honestly, yeah.
it's crazy because it just comes out of it fits into the section, but it just comes out of left field, almost like somebody stumbled upon like George or John or Ringo did a thing and they're like, oh, that's cooler than this. And I fucking love that. This is one of those songs where if you showed this to somebody, they probably wouldn't even recognize it as a Beatles song. And this would be the perfect catalyst to get somebody who might have that opinion, like Beatles are overrated. It's like, listen to this. What do you think this is? Who do you think this is?
Yeah.
You think it's Enya? No, it's the Beatles.
And if I could bring up one thing once again, one of my issues with the White Album per se is that the experimentation goes way too far. This is experimentation done right for the Beatles. It's George going way out on a limb and being like, I'm just going to try this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll never do it again. And he just like nails it. Total home run, I think it's a great moment on the record.
It's amazing how we've now had this very interesting consistency where it's a really good song and then a song that maybe isn't so good.
Yeah.
So we get to so then we get to When I'm 64, which in my opinion, I'm like, I don't care what you have to say. I think that you're going to have a similar opinion. This is just Pixar music and I love it. This is a perfect song. Truly, in that kind of way where the Beatles have become a commercial giant post breakup and now post death of two of them. And I think that people kind of forget that the Beatles also really wrote just good music. You hear this song and it's like I would show this to my children if I had kids. It's just a fantastic, fun little song. But you got Paul McCartney, who he does this really beautiful trick. He'll sing on really up songs and then sing about like the saddest shit you've ever heard, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then it's like, oh no, he's talking about like getting old or whatever. But man, just a beautiful, fun, bouncy little like Beatles song. Ringo's good. Ringo's playing. This is the song that made me want to take a metronome and put it up to take the BPM and put it up to Ringo's playing, because that dude's got to be playing within like a decameter of perfect. And then at the end, this is just something that I wanted to mention to you. If you listen to this with headphones, at the end, the last measure of the song, somebody does something and Paul slightly giggles into the microphone. He's singing, but he has like a skip up. And then you can hear him smile. I can't describe it, but you can hear him almost lose the boat for about a second. And closing your eyes and hearing Paul McCartney do this goofy little giggle pulled me closer to being into music that I have not experienced in years. Because it's such a real human thing to do. To be in like a microphone booth or whatever and you're singing, and I don't know, like Ringo Starr flips you off, and then you're like, oh, that's funny. I'm in the middle of this take. I don't want to do another take of this. And it just lightened the whole thing for me.
I do agree that this is fun, Pixar soundy, simple music, 4/4, it's cool. What I really enjoy about When I'm 64 is one, tubular bells. If you throw tubular bells on a song, I'm always down for it. And then the clarinet, I think, brings a lot to the song. Because it's almost like Paul is, saying, when I get older, losing my head many years from now, he's saying it to somebody. And the clarinet almost sounds like the response to what he's saying, like the other person in the room, quote unquote. I like the call back and forth that's going on. With that being said, is it one of my favorite Beatles songs? No. Is it something that I want in my Beatles playlist of like 50 Beatles songs? Not really, which is fine. But it's that sort of roller coaster up and down we're going with here. And then, you know what? Maybe I made a mistake saying that, Lucy is maybe I still think Lucy's the weakest song. But here's a potential hot take. I think the most forgettable song, honestly, is Lovely Rita. I sometimes forget this song even exists, let alone on this record. And I don't know why that is, because it's not a bad song. I think it's doing cool things. I don't think it's, a bad song per se. It's just kind of there. And it comes so late in the track listing that by the time we get to Lovely Rita, I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to feel the weight of this because, Within You, Without You is amazing. When I'm 64, all right. And then you followed up with Lovely Rita, and it's like, okay, it's like, where are we going to? Now we get to the eventual end of Sgt. Pepper, which definitely ends on a high. But in order to get there, we have to get through these tracks. And Lovely Rita's a moment where I'm like, I feel like we're kind of going through the motions. What are we doing?
I think it's a good Beatles song. It's a good song, just in general. But I think especially on a record with such highs, and in my opinion, we haven't even gotten to the high. They do this thing where you go, oh man, this is like a really good Beatles song, and like all the traditional Beatles things there. Paul's playing good bass and he's singing. That's cool. I like that his drums are compressed. That was such an interesting choice to hear near like the end of this record or whatever, where it's like, oh, you guys just figured out you can do that. You can just slam a compressor on this, and it's like really, really like thin, but also like full. It's crazy. But yeah, at this point, it's like they're doing a shaker. Everybody's playing, but it's just the Beatles. And that's a crazy statement, is that it's just the Beatles. But when you've got you, for example, have a song coming up that is like, oh, man, you really put the thinking cap on for this one. Songs like this become like second place.
And I do love the piano towards the end. I think the piano work at the end is really cool. Very like, tinny piano, like it's really cool. And it ends in that, just closes it out. And then the next thing you hear is a rooster calling out like it's the morning, and you're like, what the and before you can even finish your sentence, just good morning, and I'm like, what in the fuck is this? What the hell is this? And then nothing to do to save his life, call his wife, and like, good morning. I don't know if this is like a hot take. I know I keep saying that. This is a guilty pleasure Beatles song for me. I love this song, and God, is it stupid as hell, but I love every second of it. Like, just so bombastic, just so big. And I don't even know what the song's about, honestly. I have no clue what's happening, because you got all these animal sounds towards the end where it's just like horses come in, and then there's an elephant and a lion. I'm like, what the hell is happening? But while all this chaos ensues, it's like, it feels like the loudest song on this album, and I'm pretty sure it is. I don't think there's any song louder than Good Morning. And the thing I like too is, I swear to God, Ringo's playing double bass. Like, I'm positive there's double bass patterns in this song, which, I mean, I could be wrong, but it sounds like he's got like the double kick going at certain moments.
Yeah.
Which, for this era of this time period in music, that's awesome. Like, I just gotta love that.
Yeah, I think the song itself is good. Man, I don't know why. I must have had a bad dream last night about John Lennon. It just, every time he's popping up now, it just kills me. But I think, good.
Well, I was going to say, your big highlight on this album, I'll let you know, is part John. John had a big part.
Oh, no. That. I'm aware it's big part John.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a good song. I think in the flow of the record, it's nice because at this point, it's almost like the Beatles are just being like, screw it, throw the whole kitchen at them. We're doing it. Like, this honestly probably was like something that John brought in and said, hear me out. This will just be fun. This will just be cool to do. Yeah, and they were like, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's just weird, especially when you get towards the ending and all those animals come in. I'm like, I have no clue what's happening here. Like, I don't know what's going on. But I kind of, it's very much guilty pleasure for me, where I could totally see somebody being like, I hate that song. I'm like, I get it. Honestly, I do. But for me, it's just so out there and loud and zany that it's kind of like, I kind of enjoy it for that. So then, lights descend, audience is clapping, even though they're kind of confused as to what just happened. And the lights are slowly come up, and you hear 1, 2, 3, bow. And it's just a really cool way to bring back the reprise of Sgt. Pepper. I don't really need to say much about the reprise of Sgt. Pepper. It's cool, but it's just like more of the same, really. Because then what it leads into, Cody, you can certainly take the floor for this, unless you want to say something about the reprise, but it hits its last final moment. And for Cody, I think it's quite the highlight.
So this is a crazy take. If the reprise wasn't there, this record would not succeed. I truly love this fake ending. This is the best fake ending in music history because you don't expect the next song to come.
Mm.
It's like if you laid this out, any other band laid this out, they would go, okay, well that's the end of the record. We had our prologue and our epilogue. But dude, Ringo Starr comes in, and everybody, oh, Ringo Starr is a sloppy drummer. He's on it, dude.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing really good traditional rock drums. And it's like the sound is good. They come in, everybody's singing, and it's like, yes, this is how I want this movie to end. This is the perfect way. Great, I'm happy. And then it all collapses into A Day in the Life. And holy God, this is a Day in the Life is my favorite Beatles song. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. Because this whole record and the whole rest of the catalog that the Beatles have done, except for some very, very choice moments, you can kind of see somebody doing a little more. But you get to A Day in the Life, and it is a showcase of every single person's talent. Almost like you put together the A team. And it's crazy. Because you get that insane piano that kicks off the song. And then you get John Lennon singing about someone killing himself. And then, whoop, wake up, get out of bed, run a comb through my head. And it's like, what are we doing here? But it's so captivating. And sometimes, I said this earlier, the Beatles, people forget that they were a band. They've become a brand now. They become, every 10 years we get represses of all the records, and then, oh, great, we're making a movie about them. That's crazy. In my opinion, Mike, A Day in the Life is an answer to people calling them a pop act. It's an answer to psychedelic music. It's an answer to their own internal criticism, to the transition from live act to touring act to project, and then becoming something that is almost indefinable or undefinable. There are moments on this song where that whole ending, for example, that big drone out, it sounds like something that ELO heard, and that inspired ELO. That sounds like the impetus for drone metal, for noise rock. And it's so cool because it feels like everybody, for a moment, put their own personal bias aside and said, we're going to end this record on maybe the best foot that we could ever end a record. And then, dude, there's like 26 seconds of silence, and you go, oh, that's crazy. They just wrote a perfect song. Truly, a perfect song. Up there with Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Up there with Freebird. Up there with Layla. It's insane. And then, out of nowhere, one last little, piece of cake in the face. You get this crazy sampling of Never Could Be Any Other Way. It's like 1967 or whatever. You guys just sampled music? In my opinion, and Mike, I'll let you speak in a moment, this is the Beatles just pulling it all together and saying, almost, the rest of this record was just to get here. Because it's so powerful. And every time I hear it, it makes me emotional. So I'm ready for you to break my heart, Mike Kane.
I don't know if I'm going to break your heart. I will open up by saying it's not my favorite Beatles song. But as far as, that playlist of 50 Beatles songs, it's certainly in there. I do agree that I think the whole album builds up to the moment. Like it sometimes feels like everything on Sgt. Pepper exists just to get to A Day in the Life. Um, I do agree the progression of the song's amazing. The twists and turns it takes. It's cinematic as hell, which I love. And I mean, probably my favorite moment is that moment you mentioned at the very end where it's just everybody comes down on the beat and the drone and it feels like it's like 3 minutes long, but it's not, obviously.
Mhm.
It just feels like infinity, like it goes forever. And it's just like slowly and slowly getting further and further away from you until it's just too far away to even hear it. Really cool. I see. This is, of course, that like really controversial, like what is it? I don't know why I'm blanking on the word, but conspiracy song, where this is the conspiracy song of like, oh, this is about Paul being dead, and the gear shift you hear is like the car, and like Paul died in a car wreck or whatever. And I don't know, dude. Like, I don't really buy into all of that. It's interesting that it took on that life eventually. Like, oh, this is a conspiracy song, and this is what actually is. But like, I think the song exists on its own in pretty great effect. I think it is the best song on the record, just naturally. It's kind of hard to argue against that. And it's funny because I wanted to mention this at the top, but I'll mention it now, which is in the early mid 2000s, Rolling Stones did their top 500 albums of all, not the band, the magazine, the like publishing house. They did their top 500 greatest albums of all time, and Sgt. Pepper was number 1 on their list. I don't agree with that at all. But what's funny is they redid the list like 15 years later. And in fact, Cody, I don't know what the coincidence here is, but literally audio listeners can't see this, but directly behind you is what they put at number 1, which was Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. I personally think that's a better choice for number 1. I still don't think that's the greatest record ever made, but it's interesting because I think when they, did their initial list, they're like, okay, what do we put at number 1? It's like, well, it kind of just has to be a Beatles record, doesn't it? I think this might have been their thought process. And they're like, okay, which Beatles record do we put up there? Right? Because we could do the White Album, we could do Abbey Road, we could do Revolver, and they went with Sgt. Pepper. And part of me thinks they went with Sgt. Pepper because A Day in the Life is on it. And it ends the record. And it's such this huge quantum moment of the Beatles, the album, their career, etc. I feel like it makes sense that was their choice for number 1, but it's one that I don't jive with it. But they since have corrected their mistake, quote unquote. But yeah, I don't know what I was trying to get there. But A Day in the Life is monumental. It's a huge song,
and it's such a bold move to put it dead last.
Yeah,
because if you think about almost like a modern record, say like Taylor Swift, she wouldn't have put 22 at the last song on her record. And it's so absolutely mind-blowing to imagine them sitting together and thinking of it. Obviously, Sgt. Pepper's was a hit. It's the Beatles doing the Beatles, maybe at their finest moment. But to go, hey man, we're just gonna drop. It's almost like, so let's go back to an earlier episode. It's almost like if Pink Floyd did the entirety of Dark Side of the Moon, and then as a single song did Wish You Were Here. And it's just, you get there and like everything else was teasing. This is it. I'm standing on top of Kilimanjaro right now. I'm in the ISS. Everything else was the fun beforehand. That's crazy. That's what I think is the coolest thing. Because, I mean, look at the songs we've already discussed. Dude, Little Help from My Friends. That's a classic song. That's a classic instant song. Obviously, you had your opinion on Fixin' a Hole. Great song. She's Leaving Home. Great song. Within You, Without You. Great song. You put A Day in the Life dead last. That's cool. And I think that's something that should be recognized. But now we're going to take this and flip it on its head.
So just to point out, we just hit the hour mark and we have yet to even talk about the second record.
Season 2.
I guess so.
Mike, what starts Abbey Road?
Okay, so I want to start this by saying, once again, Rolling Stones did their 500 top albums list, right? And on their, now hold on their first one, Sgt. Pepper was the highest Beatles record at number 1.
Mm-hmm.
When they redid the list, Sgt. Pepper was below Abbey Road. Abbey Road was now the highest Beatles. I think it was like in the teens, somewhere like 15, 14, something like that. Abbey Road was the highest Beatles album. And bro, way to fix your mistake. Because for me, by far and away, not even fucking close, Abbey Road is not only the best Beatles record, it might be the greatest achievement in classic rock. Like, I'll go there. You know, you've got your great classic rock records. You got Rumors. You got, I'm blanking on all the great, Dark Side of the Moon, right? Dark Side of the Moon, great classic rock. Rumors, quintessential classic rock. But for me, Abbey Road is just such a culmination of everything. The Beatles, rock music, art, working with other artistic individuals, realizing that your time is up. What are you going to do in your last hurrah? It's just everything. It's everything. So that's my intro to this.
Oh, dude. No, I totally agree. This feels like if Sgt. Pepper's is we had fun, Abbey Road is we're the only ones walking out of the room today. And that is how it has to be. Because you open this record, Mike. You open this record with Come Together. And immediately, the way that I did this listening was I listened to all of Sgt. Pepper's first.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from the high of A Day in the Life. You go from the absolute, top of the mountain. And then, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, the drums are bigger, the fucking bass is louder, the guitar is there, there's a shaker, and it's like, the Beatles are not here to play. This is not fun time. We are done making music. All of you are going to look at this for the next 1,000 years and go, wow, we have a problem here. And it's insane to kick off your record. You could have done any other song, dude. You're kicking it off with maybe the most iconic Beatles song.
Yeah. I mean, that and Yellow Submarine, it's got to be like one of those two.
Has to be. And you can tell that no one is there to have fun. They're there to put in the work. They woke up and they drank black coffee because you get Ringo's kick. And if you close your eyes, I listened to Come Together 6 times. You close your eyes, that kick is shaking your chest. His tom is shaking your chest, dude. Paul McCartney said, take the bass, make it louder. Okay, thanks. And then you get this Fender Rhodes that's coming in the background, just throwing these little keys. And you go, oh, that's whatever. Mike, we haven't even talked about Harrison and Lennon. Mm-hmm. Tasteful. It is just this grab you by the throat. Come on. You're coming with me. Undefeatable.
Yeah, the way I think about it is you're going through Sgt. Pepper, you hit the mountaintop of the Day in the Life, and you made it to the top, and you plant your flag, and you're like, God, man, I made it up here. And then you hear something behind you, and you turn around, and the clouds part, and there's like a bigger mountain. It's like 2 times.
There's like another peak.
Yeah, it's like, oh my dear God. And then you hear the boom, boom. Yeah, Come Together is so cool. Such a cool song. It's just gibberish, really. I mean, some people argue the song is about the 4 of them, and it's John like describing each of them in like really odd ways. I don't know. To me, the lyrics are complete gibberish, but even despite that, like the song is just so cool. And even though it is gibberish, John sounds so good saying it over the tom and over the bass, and then the guitars, like you said, come in. Oh, it's such a cool opener to the song. And I'll let you know, just about every damn song in this record is top 50 Beatles for me. Like every song, some might be in the 40s, right? But Come Together is like top 20 easy, if not top 10, if not top 5, right? It's like one of those things. Whereas
Sgt. Top 5.
Yeah, where Sgt. Pepper has weak moments, this album doesn't have any room for weak people. It's like, if you aren't hitting 9 out of 10, you're not allowed in. And so they're like, well, we got to bring all the 9 to 10 out of 10s up in here. And they did, at least for me.
And it's just crazy to think, because this record must have come out at least bare minimum 40 years ago, 50 years ago at this point.
Yep. 69, I believe.
Oh God, yeah. Very few things are still touching this.
Yep.
That's crazy. And then you look at the people who have covered this song, and you look at the attempts, and they all try to add. They all try to, oh, we're gonna put like distortion on the bass. Oh, we're gonna put a little swing to it. No. Come Together is Come Together, and everything you do is denigrating the fact that 4 people got together and wrote a perfect song. And there's nothing you're going to do to add to it. There's nothing you're going to do. All you're going to do is mess up the painting. Just let the song exist.
I will say, though, I do like that Aerosmith cover. I do like that one. And I think the one in, I don't know if you've ever seen Across the Universe, the movie that was like the Beatles musical, whatever.
Yeah.
Their version of Come Together, I think, is pretty cool. But you're right in that no one's touching the original. Like, the original is just on its mountaintop.
Yeah.
As is the next song, which quite possibly is the greatest love song ever written. Like, oh, it's just perfect from top to bottom. Something by George Harrison, mainly George Harrison. Oh, it's so gorgeous. It's just so of the vibe that it's trying to set, which is, George talking about his love, talking about his wife. And it's like, it's just so oozing romance. It's so oozing that like, oh, I'm in love with you kind of feeling. Even the fast part where, the chug, or not the chug, it was not like we're metal, right? But like sort of the gallop thing happens, and it still has the vibe. And then to come out of the gallop with the little guitar, like boo doo 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 doo, boo doo 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 doo. Oh man, it's just, get ready for me, Cody, to just say perfect song after perfect song, because that's where we're at this point.
This is the song where I specifically thought to myself, the Eagles spent 30 years trying to create this exact moment and failed.
Yep.
Because it's like just insane. Because like I was saying earlier, sure, Lennon and McCartney, those are the two, right? Those are the two Beatles. George Harrison held that foundation down like no one else could have. And then you get these moments, and then later in his career, Everything Soon Must Pass, a whole record of him going, hey, they wouldn't listen to me, so I'm gonna write some of the best contemporary adult music that you've ever heard in your life, dude. How you're at the end of your career. That's crazy to think about, is that you're walking out on top of your game, and you're still writing really beautiful songs. And at this point, it's almost like everybody in the Beatles grew up at the same time, and they all reached the same level of musical talent. Because everything before this is getting to Abbey Road. And sure, I mean, Let It Be is cool. But you get to Abbey Road, and it's like, oh, okay, so George Harrison just laid down one of the most recognizable licks of all time, and it's song 2. And we've got 13 other songs. So I agree, dude.
And the thing to keep in mind is that this is their last record. Like, yeah, Let It Be came out after Abbey Road, but this is the last thing they recorded together as the Beatles. And so there's that air of like, man, we kind of don't like each other anymore. Or like, John's with this whole Yoko thing. He's ruining it. Like, what are we going to do? And they all man up and go, you know what? If this is our last hurrah, then we got to bring it. And they just bring it, my dude. Like, they come together, pun intended. And they just like bring the heat for everything here. And as well, it's post-White Album, where I've said it before, I'll say it again. My issue with White Album is it feels like 4 different musicians coming together and just like compiling songs on an album. And it just happens to be the Beatles. This feels like 4 musicians of the same unit going like, okay, this is the George song. Great. George can lead it, but all of us have to bring our A game. We can't just let George be the only one bringing it right now. Like, the next song we get to, Maxwell Silver Hammer, is the Paul song. Okay, it's weird, right? But like we got to all bring it. We can't just like phone this one in. And like every song on here is not phoning it in, where songs on Sgt. Pepper's for me are phoning it in. It's just, it sounds like, oh, Ringo's leading this one. I mean, the Ringo song is the bad example because I think it's a great song, but oh, John's leading this song. Okay, I'll give you a bass lick, but whatever. Like this one's like, oh, right, you need a bass lick. Let me pull out one of my standards and like just give it to you. Now, in the case of Maxwell Silver Hammer, you know, probably my least favorite song here, but even then, like I still love the hell out of this song. It's weird, it's zany, it's that sort of Mr. Kite thing, but like doing it better, like being weird, but like bringing it to the comedic level it needs to go. I mean, you've got such a happy-go-lucky sounding song, and it's literally about a dude killing people with a hammer. And every time they talk about the hammer, they got the clang clang going. Like any other band would be like, oh, you know, this needs to be a dark song because it's about murder and death and like blood. And Beatles are like, nah, man, like let's just make it fun. Let's make it funny. And I think that's what makes the song work as opposed to like a darker whatever song that it might have been.
That is absolutely exactly how I feel about this song. This song is crazy. A wild song. First off, Paul McCartney's coming in. Bass is like louder than any bass has ever been in the history of music. Oh, you know, I'm just singing this song, and then he's like talking about it like a woman, whatever she's gonna go on this date with this guy. She's giving him a chance. Oh, what happens? Oh, at the front door, hits her in the head with a hammer. And then what do you get? You get the ting tings of the hammer, and it's like, what? And then the teacher was mean. Oh, you know, what's going to happen? Is the kid going to get detention? No, teacher gets beat to death with a hammer. Yep. Ting, ting. And then there's like a synth that pops up out of nowhere, but it's like tasteful. And so you're sitting here having a good time hearing this song about this lunatic beating people to death with a hammer. And then you go, oh, this is on Abbey Road. And it's just like such a crazy thing. Because then, once again, Paul's giggling. Someone did something and Paul's like, oh, that's funny. I'm just singing a song about people getting beaten to death with a hammer. But it works in the flow of the record.
And to open your song with Joan was quizzical, studied astrophysical, like what a rhyme, dude. Like that's some deep rhyme cut right there. That's some Shakespeare shit. And I'm all about that.
McCartney had that sitting in a book somewhere for like years.
Yeah,
he was flipping through it and was like, the Joan one. We'll do the Joan one.
Yeah. It's like, well, it's our last record. All right, got to bring out this one because I'm not going to have another opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to get rid of this book eventually.
Yeah. But then we followed up with another Paul song in Oh Darling, which, man, maybe Paul's, well, I mean, it might be a stretch, but maybe Paul's best vocal performance, or at least my favorite vocal performance of Paul's career. I mean, Helter Skelter is really good too. But when you think of Paul, like the cute Beatle is what he often got referred to, the attractive one of the group. And like, you think of him sitting at the piano and singing Oh Darling, like this, like, oh, you're so hot, you're so sexy song. And like the first part, like the first couple verses of Oh Darling is just like Paul and his lovely voice. And then when you get to the chorus, he just takes on this like grit, this raunchy, like this like gravel in his voice. And it's so like up and down, up and down, up and down. And like, I love that about it. The drum work by Ringo is like so underviewed what's the term I'm looking for? Oh, underrated. So underrated on this song. Cause like some of his fills in this song, he's doing like, almost feels like 128 notes. I mean, I don't think he is, but like he's going so fast down the tom line. And it just doesn't get talked about. Again, another just killer track in my opinion.
The thing that I like about this song is that, man, everybody is, it's on their A game, and you're in the middle of the record at this point. You are past the first like 3 songs, and you would expect it to be like, oh, okay, we're going to start trending down, maybe. We're going to start getting to a plateau. No. You ever heard Paul McCartney yell? You're about to, and you're going to love it. You ever thought that Ringo was a bad drummer? Joke's on you. He's a fantastic drummer. But then also, the bass line on this song, Paul McCartney, at the end of every like chorus, he throws in this one bass chord, which is crazy to hear. because his Hofner is so big, the sound is so thick, that it's just this, like, note. And it's like, holy shit. You're just pulling out all of the stops now. It is just absolutely fantastic. And then you would look at it, right? If you looked at the songwriters on every one of these songs, you would go to the next one and go, oh no. Oh, I guess I gotta start packing. It's Ringo Starr.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mike, I love you. To the people at home who shit on Ringo Starr, fuck you. Octopus Garden kills. This is my favorite Ringo song.
It's probably my number 2 for sure.
Crazy, because so we've got a song about murder, we got a song about hanging out, we got a song about falling in love. What's Ringo gonna do? It'd be cool to hang out with an octopus. You and me down there together. No one would ever tell us what we have to do. And you go, it's gonna sound stupid. But like Mike said, everybody came together and said, all right, we're going to put 100% effort to this Ringo song. And it's so fucking good. Because Ringo just wants to be happy.
Yeah.
That's all the dude wants. He just wants to wake up with a smile on his face and go to bed with a smile on his face and eat like a full meal throughout the day. And everything else is getting him to that goal. And you listen to this song and you think that George Harrison might just throw it away. I'm going to play whatever. Harrison's playing tasteful guitar licks. Paul McCartney might go, I'm just going to play Paul McCartney stuff. Paul McCartney's playing some of his best bass work on this song. John Lennon's doing John Lennon things. And you got Ringo Starr, God bless him, singing his lovely little heart out about wanting to hang out in an octopus garden with his girlfriend, or his wife, or his kids, or whoever. And it blows my mind that people shit on him. Because it's like, yo, John Lennon wrote a song about being in a strawberry field forever. And you're going to get upset about Ringo Starr wanting to hang out with an octopus? And there's a reason it ended up on this record. Because it's good. It's a good song.
Yeah, that is a good point. Like, this could have been in the catalog for 2 years, and they were like, no, wait a second. That's a really good song. We should hold on to that. And then Abbey Road comes along, they're like, all right, this is the moment, Ringo. You gotta bring this one out. And what I love about Octopus's Garden is that it feels like you're actually underwater, which is such a weird thing. But like, I feel like I'm under the sea sitting in the Octopus's Garden when I hear this song. And it's such a ridiculous notion of like, hanging out with an octopus in their garden, whatever that means. But like, you hear the song and you're like, nah, man, like, that's cool. Like, that sounds awesome. I would love to spend my afternoon in the octopus garden and just like sitting out there having tea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Dude, not everything has to be so serious.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind because this sounds like this is just Cody defending Ringo for the last hour and 20 minutes. The dude was 25% of the fucking Beatles. You don't get that by being a bum. They're the Beatles. The Rolling Stones have gone through 7 different guitar players. Keep circling back to Keith Richards. It's Ringo.
Mm-hmm.
Try playing drums and try singing this song, and then you come back to me. Because I know I can't do it, and I'm a damn good musician. Stop pooping on Ringo Starr. Just let him be happy. He's old, man.
Yeah,
go see him in the Rubber Band and just throw up your peace signs, man. Who cares? It's a good song. Jesus Christ.
It's also one of those things where when someone says my favorite Beatle is X, whether it be Paul, George, Ringo, or John, I'm like, that makes sense, honestly. Because all 4 of these guys were like, especially on this record, were just killing it all over the place. So when someone says, yeah, Ringo's my favorite or John's my favorite, I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. But then, Cody, oh my dear God, you get I Want You, She's So Heavy, which, oh my God. Like, the progenitor of metal music, I think, is literally this song. And maybe not the progenitor, right? Because Black Sabbath was 69 as well. So they came out either shortly before or shortly after this release. But it feels literally like metal was conceived in this moment, where they're like, yeah, we've had heavy stuff before, but like, what if we really went heavy, you know? Let's literally call it I Want You, She's So Heavy, just to emphasize how heavy this song is. And oh my God, I feel it in the depths, the pits of myself. I feel this song. And it's crazy because it starts out heavy and then they get to the I want you, boom, 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 just like quiet, just so quiet. And then they come in with very quiet, just boom, doom, and so much of the song is quiet, but then when you get to the chorus, you know, then it's boom, 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 boom. Oh man, dude, this song, Cody, and then you get the guitar solo like in the middle of it. That it's like that sort of like basement blues feel, like basement jazz or some shit. But my favorite part by far is gotta be the never-ending ending, which is they just play the bar, you know, they play the 8 measures or whatever it is, and it feels like they repeat it literally 50 times. It's like, this song isn't ending. And no matter how many times I've heard this song, I literally have to like pull out my phone or whatever I'm listening to and see how much time is left. And I'm like, there's still 45 seconds left. They've been doing this for the last 4 minutes. And yet it's a thing where if it went on for literally 16 minutes, I wouldn't be bothered by it. It's actually one of my favorite songs to play on drums, just because the last 4 minutes of the song, I just start improvising it. Like, just start adding crazy fills, or just start to try adding double kick in there and see what happens, or do a ride pattern and see how that goes. It may be my favorite Beatles song just because of how just like it's just so heavy. I can't describe how heavy. And obviously, you know, now 40 years, 50 years removed, we've got heavier stuff, right? We've got Slayer, we've got Meshuggah. We know what heavy is now. But to be in 1969 and be playing Abbey Road, and then you get to this thing, it's like, I don't think I've heard anything this heavy before, and I just love the hell out of it.
And what a gnarly choice to slam this 8-minute jam session in the middle of Abbey Road. That's crazy to me. This is, in my opinion, like Mike and I have said, if this is the Beatles walking in, shaking hands, going, we're going to do this as professionals. We're not going to do it as the kids who wrote, you know, Love Me Do. We're going to do this as people who were going to walk out of this happy. This feels like they looked at everybody around them and said, match it. Match it. This is the last one. Match it. And it's crazy because this is on the same album that 5 songs ago had come together. The next song on this record is crazy. And we've talked about pretty big records here. I don't think any are stacked as heavy as Abbey Road.
Oh yeah, like it's every bullet's in the chamber. It's loaded to the nth degree.
Yeah, they had 15 rounds, and then they said each one of these is going to matter.
Yeah,
but also George Harrison, like you mentioned, he does that solo. It sounds like Santana copied it exactly for Black Magic Woman. It's almost the exact same notes. And then you have Paul McCartney pulling these random crazy bass runs out of nowhere. He's just flying through these things. But it's not out of spite. It's almost out of like friendly competition. Like how when we talked about Lazy, for example, how I said, this jam session has happened before and it's going to happen again. That's what this feels like. It feels like you got the best players you could and said, hey, jam on the blues for a little bit. Give me 10 minutes of blues jams. Ringo comes in, smile on his face, match this. Paul comes in, smile on his face, hey, play this one. And it's so impressive because maybe for some people, we aren't even at the best song on this record.
So what's interesting is that I Want You, She's So Heavy is the end of side A on the vinyl. So you end it on I Want You, She's So Heavy, and you're like, oh my dear God. And then you flip it over, and you get the prettiest guitar sound. And it's like the sun is, I mean, it's Here Comes the Sun. It's like the sun is literally rising on the dark night that you just went through. I mean, I gotta tell you, like, this album, it it just is so cohesively built. It's so unfuckwithable. It's so perfectly designed in like every moment. I'm strong of the opinion that, I mean, it's not my favorite record ever, but of the classic rock genre, I think this is easily by far the best thing that was ever made in that genre of like 20, 30 years of music. I think this is the crowning achievement, because you get moments like this where you flip it over and just the pretty guitar and Here Comes the Sun comes on, which is such a quintessential Beatles, George Harrison, whatever song. It's so pretty. It's so beautiful. And once again, it's all four of them going, all of us need to bring it here. All of us need to make this great. Because George can make it as great as he wants, but unless all of us make it great, it's not going to be great. And they just bring it. All of them do exactly what they need to. They know exactly where they need to be. The harmony vocals in the chorus are just beautiful. George's, like, how he comes back in after it with like the chorus, and it's like the bee 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 bee, and then George comes in with the vocals that he does. Oh, it's just beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful.
Every Here Comes the Sun is, I've said this statement before, and this is going to be the time I'm going to elaborate on it. Here Comes the Sun existed in the ether of the universe. It took the Beatles to pull it out. When you watch a sunrise on a nice April morning, that is this song. When you were on a road trip with your friends and you leave at 4 a.m. and you're driving through the mountains of South Carolina to get to like Atlanta, and the sun comes up and you feel the cold air and it's dewy and half of your friends are asleep, this is that sound. It took 10 years of the Beatles writing everything else to get to this moment of where not only, like Mike said, you're flipping the record over. We listened to this straight through. We didn't experience the first time of, oh man, side one's over. I got to pick up the needle. I got to flip it. I got to put it back on the turntable. You activate the arm. The tray starts spinning. Could you imagine? I would throw up out of pure elation if I heard the sound of the record going and then that brief little bit of static and then do 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 do. That's it. Game over. Chicago Bulls have won the World Series, dude. And it's crazy because, like Mike said, they all pulled it in. No one here is fighting. The tension that you hear is the tension of hope that when they walk out of that room that last day, and in the future when they start bickering and Paul and John start trading shots at each other, that what they did during these sessions will be timeless, will be a way to end. And it's crazy because you get someone who typically doesn't sing on a lot of Beatles songs. Principal songwriting, maybe top 5 biggest Beatles songs. And that's impressive because if you think about top 5, almost every Beatle is in that list. Think about it. You could put Ringo up there with Yellow Submarine. That's, sure, people denigrate that song because it's not serious or as impressive, but think about Earworms.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you could listen to me saying Yellow Submarine and you're now hearing the melody and you're now hearing those 3 or 4 different voices, each pitched differently, singing that. And I don't even have to sing the line. That's insane. God bless it. Because, man, they walked out and they locked that door and said, yeah, we did everything we could. We did everything we needed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's an album filled with that, where every song is like that. And it's funny you mentioned earlier that something was the Eagles trying to obtain something for like 30 years and never could. I feel like the Eagles' Seven Bridges Road is them trying to do because, and they
Yeah.
don't quite do it as well in my opinion. Fuck, dude, because like, oh my god, again, like it here comes the sun as the sun rising, and it's the daytime and it's beautiful, and then the sun sets, and in the last moment of light of the sun cresting over, you get the it sounds like a harpsichord or something, just the
Hmm.
and then the sun goes down, and now it's nighttime, and you're just like in the field, and the stars are up high, and the crickets are chirping, and it's like because dude, and just like oh my god, the melodies, the vocal harmonies of this shit is so good. I don't even know how to fathom how they like came up with this idea of like, okay, all the three of us, John, Ringo, or not Ringo, John, Paul, George, excuse me, the three of them are like, all right, let's do a harmony song because we were known for that, and this is our last record, so what are we gonna do? And they just pull out because from like the brain patterns of their mind, and then it just turns into what because is, and it's so gorgeous. And the way in which the three of them tackle the harmonies, it's just man, it's just so beautiful.
I agree. I agree. The first time I heard this song, I hated it, and then every time after that was me opening up to the idea. If it on the final listen, I was like, yeah, no, this deserves to be on Abbey Road, which is crazy because then the next song we get.
Well, I mean, you can introduce it, but I've got a lot to say.
No, please go ahead.
Well, the thing is, in my opinion, because could have been the last moment, right? It feels like a conclusion of like, oh, well, it's the last song. Let's just do this little thing to end it on. But you get the whole damn Abbey Road medley. So you go through the entire Beatles catalog, and they have never done this before. This thing that they attempt on the end of Abbey Road, and you got so many questions like, why are they suddenly doing a medley? Why are they doing it on their last record? Like, why didn't they try this before? And you could argue that Sergeant Pepper is like, it's a flowing, like every track flows into each other. So maybe that's the medley, but not like this, where like literally every song is just starts, it ends, and then the next song immediately starts from the ending of the previous song. Um, I don't know about you. I mean, we'll talk about each individual moment. I see this as one song. Um, I sort of take it as a Lord of the same way I see Lord of the Rings, which is Lord of the Rings is one thing just broken into three parts because it's just so long, right? It's one movie broken into three parts. It's one book broken into three parts. This is one song broken into individual parts. And for me, earlier in the Sgt. Pepper discussion, you said A Day in the Life is the greatest like culmination of an ending to a Beatles record. For me, it's this. In fact, I think this is the greatest culmination of their entire career. When I listen to the Abbey Road medley, it feels like it's the last thing they ever recorded together. Like when you start You Never Give Me Your Money and get to the end of The End, it literally feels like, all right, guys, this is it. I love you. We've had a great 10 years. Let's bring it home. And then they start playing You Never Give Me Your Money. And I like literally get emotional just thinking about it because it feels so much like it's all of them just like playing in the studio, and they're looking up at each other and smiling and like having a good time, and everybody's giving it their all because they know it's the end. Oh, I just adore it. I adore everything about it. And again, we'll break down each individual one, but I'll let you say something before we start.
It's one of those things where the Beatles have been given their flowers 1 million times over. And that, I think, takes away from the artistic integrity of what a everything that came up to Abbey Road, every moment that built to Abbey Road, all of the TV shows and all the specials and the movies and all the crazy publicity and everything like that. And then you get to Abbey Road, and it's its own almost separate band, because it's not four people and a producer, and you get Eric Clapton on a song and things like that. It's not 4 or 5 or 6 people going, this is my song, play on it, or this is our song, play on it, or here's a suggestion for a song, play on it. It's four people together as a hive mind saying, we know what we're doing, and each of us know what the other person is going to do, and we're locked in, and we're going to end this by not writing a whole bunch of really, really good songs. Fuck it. We're going to write a whole medley. And some of those songs on that medley are going to be better than handfuls of songs on our first 3 records. And we're going to walk out of here knowing that everything moving forward is never going to touch this 15 song album.
I mean, like I said, I don't even think it's the 3 records. You said that it feels like a day in the Sgt. Pepper as an album feels like it just builds to a day in the life, and that's the reason it exists. I think the entire Beatles career exists so that they could eventually get to the Abbey Road medley and let that be their final moment. Like, it's that huge. It's that conclusive. It's that goddamn good. So, to break it down into its individual parts, you open with You Never Give Me Your Money, which, yeah, oh my God. You start with the piano and Paul's just, doing his thing. And then you get into like the jangly part, like the bean, and it's like, it's strange, it's odd, but it all is, again, beautiful. Then you get into the harmony of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven, and just like rolling into the sort of pit that it's falling into, or just going into obscurity. But again, it's a medley, so they can't just outright cancel the silence. And so you got like this, I don't know what it is, but it's like this like tinkle, like this twinkling, tinkling thing, just going like bing, bing, bing. And then what sounds like a projector screen or something starting. And if you want to say something about You Never Give Your Money, feel free to. But then just like the way the bass comes in on Sun King, and just like that, again, it's that feeling of like, it was nighttime, here comes the sun, but this time it's like an orange sun. It's like a mellow, dewy, grassy morning sun. And like there's a bit of fog like rolling in, like kind of thing. It's like so cinematic to me. And I love like the first minute of Sun King. I think it's such a cool vibe. Oh, sure. I'll roll through the whole thing if you want. Okay. So you get, eventually I'm pretty sure it's John on Sun King, but it might be George. I may be wrong. It sounds like a George song, but I'm pretty sure John is the one singing. But again, it's gorgeous. It's that feeling of like, I don't know who the Sun King is, but I feel his presence. I feel him coming, and he's like this great benevolent leader. He's not tyrannical. He's not interested in war. He's not interested in money. He's just interested in his people being happy, right? And he has come in, and his presence just graces us. And it's like that vibe the whole way through, and it's vibey as hell. And then they cut the vibe. They take the scissors and just pluck it. And then just like the Mean Mr. Mustard of the Mean Mr. Mustard is just like a totally 180 vibe. Again, I don't know who Mean Mr. Mustard is. I don't know who half these characters are. But it's the way that they just like know how to flow to the next thing. And even though every track is so different from each other, it all still just like cohesively flows into the next thing. So you get a very like muddy piece in Mean Mr. Mustard. It feels like dirt and mud and just like slinking through like a swamp or something, and you gotta take force to lift your leg out of the mud and put it back into the next step you're taking, which then flows to Polythene Pam, which is just like taking that and just like running, right? It's like you get out of the mud, and I'm out of the mud, great, let's take off, let's sprint down the street. And I do love the sort of propulsion of Ringo's drums on this song. It's just like, it's bouncy. It's just boom, 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 boom. He's not playing that, but he's like playing a rhythm that is like that feeling. And John is just like bouncing around with him. And again, I totally see this where all the guys are in the studio playing this, and all of them are just like bobbing their head to it, or they're like moving like this to it. And like Ringo's just locked in the beat, and everyone's just on top of him. Build, 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 break. She came in through the bathroom window, and it's just, God,
crazy.
It's so good. It's so good.
Crazy.
Like, you expect the build, the build, the build, the build. And again, in any other Beatles song, it would build, 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 bang, crash, descend, fade out, whatever. No, we build, 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 build to the high of the intro to She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, and then we slide down into the rhythm of the song, into the playing of the song. It's moments like this that just like make this so good, just like the whole way through. And again, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, such a vibey track, such a like, I mean, it's a strange concept, which I think Paul actually referred to somebody actually coming in through his bathroom window, like a crazed fan or something, and just makes a song about it, because why the hell not? It's our last record, whatever, we'll do it. Then you get the hard cut. The only hard cut in the entire medley is between She Came In Through the Bathroom Window and Golden Slumbers. Everything just comes out, because you get the bean doom, bean doom, bean doom, and then Paul singing on Golden Slumbers. Oh my dear God. Oh my dear God.
Golden Slumbers. It's almost really like there's two medleys happening here. Because the way when I listened to it, medley 1 ended with She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. And I was like, hell yeah. Great for you guys. And then Golden Slumbers start. And it's like, brother, you're winding down right now. And you're going to make me fucking cry. It is so unbelievably potent. The what Paul is singing about is so beautiful. And then what comes next, Mike?
Well, I just want to say, like, you mentioned you want to make me cry. Like, for me, I get emotional every time I hear the medley. Like,
yeah,
I'm not like crying, sobbing, crying, but like I start welling up. I'm like, because again, and I think it really comes to a culmination in the last bit. The last bit of the medley always gets me really emotional, because I truly believe, I don't know if this was the case, but in my heart of hearts, I believe this is literally them recording their last thing ever. It's like, all right, we got to do this in one take. It's the last thing we're ever going to do. Let's bring it home. And it feels like it's literally the last time the four of them were ever together in a studio. And this is it. This is what we're hearing right now. So you get Golden Slumbers, and they bring in the orchestra, strings, and the just like the sounds they're bringing in that were not part of part A, like you mentioned, the part A part of the medley. We're in part B. We're getting towards the end. Bring in the damn violins. Bring in the cellos, right? We need them. And so they bring in these string sections, and then just slide right in to basically a chant song and Carry That Weight. Just like the four of them just shouting, fist pumping kind of thing. You're gonna carry that weight. Like it's a total stadium rock anthem where everyone in there's, stomping their foot, raising their fist. It's just, again, that 180 vibe, which is what makes this great. But then one of my favorite parts of the whole medley is they bring back the melody from You Never Give Me Your Money. But it's the strings that are doing it. It's not the guitars or anything. It's the strings doing the boom, 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 boom. And when they come back in with the lyrics or the vocal pattern from You Never Give Me Your Money, dude, I start welling up. Like, it's just so gorgeous. It's so beautiful. And again, I think you have a good point in there's part A of the medley and part B. But part B is pulling from part A now. So like it's feeling truly cohesive now, the whole thing. And then, you get the pattern of You Never Give Me Your Money, and then boom, 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 back into Carry That Weight. And again, the chanting is happening, and it's building. Again, it's building, it's building, it's building. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. I'm just gonna sing the whole thing because I love it so much. But then you get the end, a song that's literally called The End, right? Like they call we'll talk about Her Majesty, but this is like the true ending to it. This is the last hurrah for the Beatles, and they literally call it The End. And you get a Ringo Starr solo. You get John, Paul, and George trading solos on their respective instruments. You get a harmony vocal with all of them, because this is literally the end. So everybody's got to have a moment, and they all do. And then, the drum solo is awesome. The guitar trading is awesome. Like each one has their own distinct sound, but they're just like going back and forth with it. It's so goddamn cool. And then they all cut out, and you just get the of the piano. And the last thing the Beatles ever do with together as a collective unit, and I want to pull it up because I don't want to fuck it up. I unfortunately got rid of it, but I want to read the final lyrics of In the End, or The End, excuse me. So, from my perspective, once again, this is the Beatles' last thing they ever did together. This is their final moment in the studio, and they say, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And that's their final message as the Beatles. And they just close it out, right? If the last thing we want to say together is this, and it's just I can't think of a better way to end this album, end their career, and go out on the note of like, it was four of us, right? A lot of bands, you've got the front man who's the popular one, and the other guys you can't name them because, like, I mean, who else was in Styx, other than the front man? Who else was in Journey, right? I'm just throwing out bands, right? But it's the Beatles. All four of them. All four of them are titans. And all four of them get their stars, get their flowers on this final bit of the end. And it's just so gorgeous. And they hit the final thing, and, they put down their instruments, they start hugging each other, they start like patting each other on the back, and all four of them start walking out of the studio. And Paul goes, "Hey, I'll catch up with you guys real quick. I forgot something." And he waits till Go ahead.
What you were about to say, what you were about to get into about Her Majesty is my favorite thing about this record.
So I'll let you give your perspective. This is my perspective because I see it this way. Is Paul's like, "Hey, I'll catch up with you guys," and the door closes, and he's the only one left, and he like looks around for a little bit. And then he goes over to like he gets an acoustic guitar or whatever he's playing on, mandolin, I don't know what it is. He hits the cymbal and then just starts singing Her Majesty, like a little tee-hee moment because, well, the Beatles are over and I had this one song that I really wanted to do, but it doesn't make sense anywhere else. So I'm just going to pull it into here. But I'm pretty sure it's not listed on the track. It's a secret song, right? It's just like a hidden track. It's not on the track listing. They give enough space to where if you didn't know any better, you would just stop the record. You just turn it off because there's like 10 seconds of silence, right? I like that Paul had the gumption and gusto to go like, okay, it's just a fun little thing. I'm just going to hide it here. If people don't see it, whatever. It's just like a 30-second little diddly I came up with. But still, I do think it's a fun little moment. But just as a whole, the Abbey Road medley, I mean, it's one of the greatest achievements, in my opinion, in rock music, just period.
So like Mike and I have said multiple times on this podcast episode, the Beatles walk in to Sgt. Pepper prepared. They walk into Abbey Road ready. They walk in knowing what they're doing. The crazy thing about all of the tension, because you can't look at the Beatles without looking at the crazy story. Oh, Yoko's here. Yoko's the devil, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you want to say about that poor woman. God bless her. Looking at each other as friends, as people who have seen the world, who have 6 or 7 times changed the rule of what music can be, what music will become. Where we're going is where we are taking it. The four of us, we're doing it. You want to bring world music into popular contemporary songs? We're doing it. We're the Beatles. You want to write a protest song? We're doing it. We're the Beatles. You get to the Abbey Road medley. And this medley, because Mike has spoken, and I agree with everything he said. This is 4 people knowing that they are about to cement themselves. This is 4 people looking at what they are about to achieve and laughing and going, everything after this is going to be cool. We could never write another piece of music individually and live for the rest of our lives. But to take such a bold and brave step in going, but you know what we haven't done? You know how we did Yellow Submarine? And it was a whole movie. And we did Magical Mystery Tour. And it was a whole movie. And we did Help. What if we just make a condensed version in a record? And so they pull out every single stop, every firework. Harrison gets his moments. Lennon gets his moments. Ringo gets his moments. Paul McCartney gets his moments. and everybody is there at the end. And what did you say the final lyric was for the end?
So it's end in the end. The love you take, I think, is equal to the love you make. It's either make, take, or take, make. But I think it's the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Yeah. And so the Beatles are walking out of that room, not knowing that Let It Be will come out. And sure, Let It Be is a fine record. Don't get me wrong. And I think they knew, and they said, we cannot leave people crying. We cannot leave people in tears over the fact that we're done. That we changed the landscape numerous times, and now someone else is going to have to contend, and someone else is going to have to do the work. And I think Paul McCartney came walking into the studio and said, guys, it can't be this serious. And so, without telling anybody, without telling Apple Music, John and George and Ringo said, Paul, just go do a thing real quick. And that is why Her Majesty, in my opinion, is the perfect way to end this record. Because you're sitting there crying, and then it's like, yo, someone just made like a fart joke. And it just hits so hard that you go, now the record's over. The turntable stops. You get to put Abbey Road back into the case, into the slipcase, into the cover. But it's such a fantastic choice because everything before this, frankly, Mike, is a masterclass.
Yeah.
I've said it before in the podcast, and I'm going to continue to say it, but this is maybe the most stark example. There are bands who their entire career has been, I want to write the Abbey Road medley. And none of them have succeeded as much as those four dudes looking at each other as friends, but with conflicts, going, we can't let our personal lives take this. Soon, don't worry, soon John and Paul are going to start shitting on each other, and George Harrison's going to go write a record that should have been a Beatles record. They should have given it to him. They should have said, hey, man, we know you got this pent up art in you, and let's all try to do it together. And it's a beautiful thing that it isn't, because I think George Harrison really capped off his legacy by writing Some Things Soon Must Pass, or All Things Soon Must Pass, whatever. But to end your last record so brave, and then to just almost stuff your head in the pie one more time, like you're at a birthday party. Like, oh, you're turning 30. Oh, yeah, we're all one day closer. Boom, back in. Congratulations. I love you. That is what I think the last 5 songs on Abbey Road, 6 songs on Abbey Road does so well. It says, it's 4 grown men, and then that last 26 seconds of Her Majesty is 4 boys going, you know, it'd be funny, what if we put like a whoopee cushion under that guy's chair? And they don't conflict. It's just a perfect little way to close the door and go, you'll see us, you just won't see us. And that's all I have to say.
And for those reasons, I think, maybe, do you have is Abbey Road your favorite Beatles record?
I want to say it's still Revolver.
Okay.
But in the world of music, contemporary music, and the ability to create something that is going to translate forever, but also capture a moment, I don't think Dark Side and Wish You Were Here and Full Collapse, those all mean something to me. But when I think of music, I think of Abbey Road. When I just think of showing somebody who isn't into music, who could care less about music, I go, listen to Dark Side of the Moon, listen to Abbey Road, listen to What's Going On, and you'll get it all. You'll get the highs, the lows, the beauty, the sadness, the frustration, the anger that is gonna push you. But I don't think it's an unfair thing to say that Abbey Road might be the greatest achievement in music.
Yeah, I'm sort of on that train where for me, Abbey Road is my favorite Beatles record, and most times
Yeah.
my favorite record by a band is the one that I don't think is their best per se. Sometimes I think that, but there's some bands where I'm like, oh, that's my favorite record, but I don't think it's their best. Um, to me, I mean, anyone is willing. I mean, feel free to argue against it. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, but like to me, not only is Abbey Road my favorite Beatles record, I think it's just easily their best. I think it's the greatest thing classic rock has ever produced. And like you said, it might be quite possibly the greatest achievement of the 20th century in terms of music. That's a bold claim, I'll admit. But for me, classic rock music, I think, is defined by Abbey Road. It's just like the
Yeah.
pinnacle. It's just the one. If Rolling Stones had made their list and Abbey Road was number one, I'd be like, oh, absolutely, totally, I see that. But Sergeant Pepper being number one, it doesn't feel right to me. And I think that's a great way to encapsulate this whole conversation that's now reaching 2 hours at this point, which is Sergeant Pepper's a great record. There's nothing against Sergeant Pepper. I don't want to take away from the achievements on Sergeant Pepper, but it has its moments where I'm just like, it's fine, it's okay, it's whatever. There is not a single second on Abbey Road where I go, whatever, it's fine, it's blah, right? Every single second from track one to the end of Her Majesty is pure brilliance. Four guys just giving it their all, doing the best they can, and creating perfected art out of it. And for that also to be their final moment as a group, I think it's one of the most like beautiful stories in all of music is the conclusion of the Beatles being Abbey Road.
I agree. And, personal bias aside, because I don't come back to the Beatles regularly. They're a band I revisit probably like once a month. Swing back in, listen to a couple songs. Oh, that's cool. Oh, great, you only wrote legitimately classic, perfect songs. But I mean, that's coming from someone who I've listened to music every day for the last 20 years of my life. Who am I to say that the Beatles didn't do the thing perfect? Because they did, and it's really hard pressed to find anything that even stands up to it. And it's kind of a shame because, in my opinion, nothing in the last 10 years have come to stand up to it. And that's very, very shocking.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm not sure what else to say, Cody. I think that's a pretty conclusory note in terms of this conversation in this episode, but I'll give you the floor to have final thoughts if you have them.
Just you have to trust it. Sometimes things are successful because they're an idea. Like the Pet Rock is successful because, oh, it's a funny idea. And then some things are successful because it's someone's dream. Like Oppenheimer was successful because Christopher Nolan worked for 20 or 30 years with similar structure and then landed on something that was perfect. But then you get to something like Sergeant Pepper, where every moment before that was carving off the fat. And then you get to A Day in the Life, and they have carved the fat a little more. But then you get to Abbey Road, and there's no fat. It's all muscle. You have to trust that the record is good. Because if you listen to it and you have never listened to Abbey Road, you're going to lose your mind at how complete it is. And then go from there. Let that introduce you to new things. Because as fun as it is to shit on the Beatles sometimes, no one has done it since. And frankly, no one is ever going to do it again. And that's not because they came up in a time where, women weren't allowed to be sexually promiscuous people. It didn't come up in a time where it was the British invasion. The Beatles succeeded because they put in the work. And when you get to this final moment of them at the peak of the mountain, you see every rung in the ladder, and damn, you realize it's very hard to climb that ladder. And that's why this record is still in press. Abbey Road's never gone out of circulation. Sgt. Pepper's has. You can go to Walmart and get an Abbey Road t-shirt. But you can also talk to 100,000 people who danced with their kids to Here Comes the Sun, who sat in bed with their spouse and listened to the Abbey Road medley, who went to a bar and put on She's So Heavy because it kicks ass. Mike, look at Come Together. Let's go to the very top of the record. Some songs are good and some songs are great, but very few songs are perfect. And you're going to kick off your record with that? Trust in music, and then music will show you everything you need to know. And I think that's it. That's the beauty of these two records.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said my piece on all of it, so I don't really have much else to add. And we have officially hit the 2-hour mark. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the longest episode we've ever done by far. But it's kind of makes sense because it's the Beatles. It's the quintessential rock band in the annals of history of music. Makes sense that this is the longest one. Will we ever hit 2 hours again? I don't know. But it was enjoyable. Thank you, Cody, for joining me on this. Thank you for this journey.
Mike, anytime, and I'm excited to continue to have an objective opinion about music.
Absolutely. That's what we're here to do. Just talk about music. Two dudes who like music.
Sure is.
All right. As to the audience, thank you for joining us as always. We'll see you on the next one, and thank you for being you. Take care.
Be well.